welcome back to Conversations with Jennifer. Hope you're doing well. Jennifer is an estate planning attorney, and today we're going to talk about the top 3 mistakes that we see trustees making. And maybe, Jennifer, we should qualify this because we're not working with everybody in the world. We typically work with people that have trusts already in place, right?
Correct.
And that should be kind of a big piece of this. But
yeah,
trustees make all sorts of mistakes, right?
It's a tough job, certainly, and we've talked about that in the past. It's why trustees should be carefully considered before being selected. It's why they should receive compensation. Because there's a lot of complications, a lot of pitfalls, a lot of mistakes that we see during our representation of either trustees or beneficiaries. We represent both. But we wanted today to kind of share, the top ones that I see the most in my practice. And we'll start with the third, most common, which is trustees or executors. It applies to both situations who don't follow the actual terms of the documents. They go a bit rogue as far as what they're doing. So really, and that's honestly the first place we start when I have a meeting with a successor trustee is what are the terms of the document that you're supposed to be following. That is always the first step that we do. And then we walk through other items. But really, what does the trust say? And what are you supposed to be doing during this administration? So that's one huge item.
Yeah, and I guess there's so these are the top 3, but like self-dealing, mishandling terms of the trust. And there's a lot of things, but following the terms of the trust has to be, big up there because that could create liability for the individual trustee. I'm talking about like unintentionally creating liability. Yeah.
Absolutely. This is not a person who is oftentimes choosing proactively to not do the right thing. They just think that it should be simple and it should just be distributed this way. And there's a lot more complication oftentimes in estate planning. So again, carefully selecting your trustee is always important. And again, walking through the document with that successor trustee so that they understand what the process is and also what the document says as far as distributions and the beneficiaries and how those assets are to be distributed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what's number 2?
Number 2 is communication. So the trustee always needs to do really an excellent job communicating with beneficiaries. That is one of the biggest issues I see in litigation matters is when beneficiaries don't feel like they're getting an adequate amount of information from the trustee. And honestly, I counsel my trustees a lot that sometimes it's okay to say we're still working on this or this is in process. But at least that continued communication of, I hear you, I understand, I will be getting in touch with you, is really one of the biggest things that a trustee can do to avoid potential liability exposure, litigation, is having really good open communication with the beneficiaries. And again, it could be as simple as, I'm working on it, or this is the process, I should get that information to you in the next 10 days or next month or whatever it is. But that is, again, why it's important for trustees to work with advisors so that they know what to communicate to the beneficiaries. But communication, I find, is huge. So
yeah, and that communication, even if you set like a reoccurring calendar alert, even it's like still working on it, or this is an update.
Just a check-in. Yeah, exactly. So it just helps things go smoothly, especially if the trustee is a beneficiary as well and they're dealing with siblings or other beneficiaries. That's a huge issue because those situations are already involve all sorts of emotional aspects to them, as you can probably guess, because they're siblings, or cousins or family members. So there's all sorts of already emotional or situational things that myself as the attorney wouldn't necessarily know, the CPA wouldn't know, the financial advisor like you, Amar, wouldn't necessarily know. But that communication is important, particularly in those family situations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the number one thing that
Yes.
in terms of frequency make this mistake?
Yeah. So the number one thing is trustees in their mind are ready to be done, and they distribute out all of the assets or most of the assets before actually sitting down, sometimes with the accountant, sometimes before sitting down with myself as the attorney, and they just distribute everything to the beneficiaries. And the reason why that is a huge problem is because trust administrations involve expenses, and they involve sometimes taxes that need to be paid. And if you as the trustee are distributing everything out before you have a really solid understanding of what are all the assets and what are all the debts, expenses, and taxes involved, then you distribute everything out, and suddenly the tax bill arrives, or the medical bill arrives, or something else happens. A creditor comes out of nowhere and decides to file a claim, and that trustee has no money left to pay those expenses. That is a huge problem. And that trustee is going to have to pay those expenses, and then on the back end try and get indemnified or reimbursed from the beneficiaries. And let me tell you, that is incredibly difficult to do. Those beneficiaries, for the most part, are already spending that money that trustee has distributed out. So that is a huge issue. And again, trustees are like, what do you mean? I distribute everything out. What's the big deal? But the trustee, is going to be personally responsible for those expenses.
Yeah, I actually had one client a long time ago where the financial firm updated their tax documentations.
Mm-hmm.
There was a K-1 involved, and they had to redo the K-1 and totally change their tax picture, and they had already made the distribution. So don't be that person, right?
No. And again, you can make preliminary distributions. We do that with a lot of frequency, but we do not do that until after we have a really solid understanding of what the situation is. Again, what are the assets, debts, expenses, and then taxes. I always advise my successor trustees, talk to your accountant and figure out what is the tax exposure been. It could just be income tax, but what is the tax exposure been last year, the year before, so that you can get a sense of what you're looking at. And again, maybe make a preliminary distribution and keep a reserve amount, but you want to be conservative about it, and definitely keep that reserve amount before making that distribution out. So
perfect. So if you're watching and you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to be serving as a trustee at some point in the future, definitely seeking the assistance of professional help is worthwhile. And you can reach out to Jennifer or myself, and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you for watching, and talk to you next time.
Thank you.
See you, Jennifer. Bye.
Bye.